Yo, this is A Fly Went By, written by Mike McClintock, and I'm gonna rap this book. I sat by the lake, I looked at the sky, and as I looked, a fly went by, a fly went by. He said, oh dear, I saw him shake, he shook with fear. And when I saw that fly go past, I asked him why he went so fast. I asked him why he shook with fear. I asked him why he said, oh dear. He said, I must get out of here. The fly said, look, and you will see. That frog is after me. The fly went past, the frog came fast. I asked the frog, I asked him why do you wanna get that fly? The frog said, me, I want no fly, but I must hop, and this is why. The cat, he said, just look and see. That cat, he said, is after me. Then he was gone with one big hop. The cat ran up, and I said, stop. Now stop, stop, stop. I told the cat, do not pick on the frog like that. The cat said, look, I want no frog. I have to get away from dog. So the fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog. One ran from the other ran too from one who came after. Now what could I do?
Right, that's actually like a 5-minute video. He raps the whole book, which is a lot of fun. But if you're unfamiliar with that story by Mike McClintock, if you haven't raised kids in the recent past and gone through it, that continues on. The fly is chased by the frog is chased by the cat is chased by the dog is chased by the pig is chased by the cow is chased by the fox is chased by the man, and the man is chased by the big scary thing that's chasing them all? Nope. Wow, all right. A sheep. A little baby lamb who got its foot caught in a tin can, and it was making a ruckus, and it scared the guy, who then scared the fox, who scared the cow, and it's just this really amazing fable, as most of our children's books are, teaching the lesson that fear can cause us to do things that are completely and totally irrational. And we're going to see some of that today. As we look at both Saul and David, we're going to see the effect that fear can have on even very strong and powerful men. But if you've not been with us so far in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, here's what we've seen so far. Judges, the book that we studied previously, was a march to the bottom for Israel. But now, 1st and 2nd Samuel is where God is going to use this prophet Samuel, and through him the kings of Saul and David, to start the journey back to the top. And they were warned, though, and warned through Samuel, that to choose a king would end up being detrimental to them, because they were going to have a king, and that king would just take from them. But in spite of that, they chose Saul anyway to be their king. Instead of having God be their leader and just following what God had designed for them, they chose a human, Saul, and asked him to lead instead. But in spite of that, in spite of the fact that they were warned, in spite of the fact that they made a bad decision anyway and should have just been just given all the consequences of their actions, God gives them a promise. And it says, in spite of this decision to follow a human instead of me, I am still going to make this promise to Israel, that in spite of your bad decisions, I will not forsake you. I will not forsake my children in Israel. And that is a promise that still endures to this day, that God, in spite of everything that Israel has chosen, is still embodying this promise to them that he will not forsake them. And as we've been looking at the life of this first king that they chose in Saul, what we've seen is that his pride ends up being his downfall. Thinking that he was better than he was, thinking that he knew best, ends up being the thing that brings him down. And as a result, David ends up being anointed the following king, the one that God says, this is going to be the man who's after my own heart. Now, that does not mean that he is going to be perfect. If you know the story of David, you know that he has some pretty major downfalls, some faults in him that end up causing him problems as well. But the way that he handles them is different. And actually, Scott's going to be giving that sermon, so I'm not going to step on his toes too much here. But there's this contrast all through the book between Saul and David, and we're going to see more of that today. So David is now anointed Saul's replacement, and as a result of that, because of Saul's pride again, Saul wants David, and he's chasing him. And David, we saw last week, through the intervention of Jonathan, Saul's son, and Michal, Saul's daughter, David has escaped, and he is on the run, and he is fleeing from the king, because if he had stayed, he would be dead. And that's where we pick up this week. As David is on the run, he's going to come to his first safe haven, and we read this. Then David came to Nob and Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, "Why are you alone, and no one with you?" And David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you, and with which I have charged you.'" So David goes to the place where the priests are, and if you remember, last week he was with Samuel and Samuel's tribe of priests, and as a result, Saul kept sending messengers to come and get David, and the idea was that they were going to get David against threat of death. So now David shows up to Ahimelech's house with his tribe of priests, and he's a little nervous. He's like, wait, the last time David showed up somewhere, the king wasn't too happy about that. And now David's showing up again, and the king's not with him. What does this mean? And David's like, don't worry about it. I am here on a matter of the king. The king has actually sent me this time, so you don't have anything to worry about. The problem is, that's a flat-out lie. David is just straight up lying to this priest, because he is not there on a matter of the king. He is quite the opposite. He is running away from the king again. And Ahimelech has every reason to be scared, but hearing that he's on a mission from the king, Ahimelech takes him in. And he says, David says to Ahimelech, "I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." And the priest answered David, "I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread, if the young men have kept themselves from women." And this is an interesting passage for a couple reasons. One, for its immediate context, and two, for the way that Jesus actually ends up referencing this story. It's a very quick passage here that would be otherwise not really remarkable, other than that Jesus eventually uses this as an illustration in the Gospel of Matthew. What's basically happened is David has come and he's like, "My men are hungry from traveling. We need food." And the priest says to him, Ahimelech says to him, "We don't have any food. I don't have any bread to give you. The only bread here is what's known as the showbread, or the bread of the presence." And what this was there were 2 groups of bread that every week in the tabernacle would have been baked on just before the Sabbath and presented on the Sabbath. There would be 1 loaf of bread for every tribe of Israel. And what it was designed to be was a picture of the communion that they had with God. It was supposed to be like the idea of leaving an extra place setting. I don't know if you've ever seen any families that do that. They put an extra place setting at the table so that Jesus can be at their table with them. I've always thought that was interesting. We don't do it because we sit on the couch when we eat, so that's not really a thing at our house. But the idea here is that throughout the week, from one Sabbath to the next, the people would have this reminder of the 12 tribes of Israel, 1 loaf of bread for each of the tribes, that God was with them throughout the week. And then the priests, after it was 1 week old, would then take that bread home and eat it. David here is with the soldiers that followed him, and they've got no food. And he asks for 5 loaves of bread, and the priest actually makes an exception. This should never have been eaten by anybody other than the priest, but the priest makes an exception. And he says, "Okay, I'll give you this bread as long as your men have kept themselves from women on the journey. As long as they are clean, I'll let them eat this showbread," which would have been a little scandalous, but it wouldn't have been terrible at this period of time. What's scandalous is that Jesus ends up using this as an illustration in the New Testament as to why practicality can sometimes trump the law. He actually uses it in conjunction with the Sabbath and says that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And he uses this story in Matthew as his illustration of that because David was hungry, the priest put away tradition, put away the strict adherence to the law, and instead met a need in David's life. Jesus would use the example of if your donkey falls into the ditch and breaks its leg and can't get out of the ditch, you're not going to be like, "Sorry, I'm going to wait till Monday or till the next day to get No, you're going to get your donkey out of the ditch, because practicality, the spirit of the law, or what's in our hearts, matters more than the strict adherence to the letter of the law. So this is why this passage becomes a little more significant in the future than what it would have been on an initial reading. We continue. And David answers the priest, "Truly, women have been kept from us always. When I go on an expedition, the vessels of the young men are holy. Even when it's an ordinary journey, everybody's clean. We're good. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. So the priest gives him the food, and then David says, "Then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand?" It's like, I need a little more help. Do you have a spear or a sword? It says, "For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste." And the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you take it, if you will take that, take it, for there is none but that here." And David said, "There is none like that. Give it to me." So David's like, I need a sword and a spear because the king's business required me to leave quickly. You know, the king's business of wanting me dead required me to leave his presence quickly and move on. So I don't have a sword or a spear. Do you have anything I could use? And the priest is like, yeah, I actually do. By coincidence, I got the sword that Goliath had before you. And you killed him, so I guess it kind of belongs to you anyway. David had actually originally given this to Saul, the king, and this would have belonged to the king. So to give it to David, there is some significance here that the priest is recognizing David is going to be filling a kingly role as he gives him the belongings that would have been reserved for the king. And he takes it, and he uses it as his own sword, which is an illustration here of actually David's growth, because when he first got it, it would have been useless to him. If Saul's sword and Saul's spear wasn't going to fit him, certainly he wasn't going to be wielding Goliath's sword as a young boy. Now he takes it because he says, this is a quality piece of armament. This is a quality weapon. I will take it. I will use it. And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, "Is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s." So David flees from one place to the next, and this is going to be a theme for the rest of the morning, David going from one place, moving on to the next. And when he gets here, he has now left the nation of Israel. So he is now in foreign lands with foreign kings, and Achish is the king of this area. And when he sees David, what he has come to understand is David is the king of Israel. Because the people have been singing this song about him, this phrase or this poem that Saul has killed his thousands, David his 10,000s. Remember, this is the very phrase that infuriated Saul enough to want David dead. It has permeated outside of Israel so much that this foreign king has actually come to believe that David, not Saul, is the king in Israel. But this is a foreign land, which means this foreign king now has, in what he thinks is the king of Israel, living in his town. Which means if this foreign king can take out the guy he thinks is the king of Israel, well, that would make him the king of Israel. And he could go in and take Israel, which means David is in great danger. For the same reason he left Saul, the king wants him dead, he's now in the land of Gath, and he's in danger because the king wants him dead. So David comes up with this great plan. You remember how I said fear sometimes leads us to do things that we might not be proud of down the road? Well, that's exactly what we see in David, because his fear at this point, which is crazy for a guy who stares down Goliath as a child and has fought lions, has fought bears, still somehow seems to lose his memory of all that, because in fear of this king of Gath, who he could have stood up to the exact same way, here's the plan that his fear leads him to enact. David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before him and pretended to be insane in their hands and made marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. David's like, I've got the plan. Here's how I'm going to make them believe that they don't need to kill me. I'm going to act like a crazy person. I'm going to make it seem like I am out of my brain. I am checked out, no threat whatsoever. I am a crazy person. The contrast here, I will stare down Goliath with a rock. I will tug on a lion's beard as I beat him with my bare hands. I will fight a bear. I will act like a crazy person so people will think that I'm no threat at all. Fear causes us to do things that are entirely outside of our personality, that are entirely outside of things that are true of us. And it causes us to do things that we eventually come to regret. But in this case, Achish says to his servants, behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? He's like, why did you bring this? This is either not David or this David is no threat. It's one of the two, because this man is a crazy person. I got enough crazy people. Get him out of here. So David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So now he's moved on to his third location. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. Here's one of our first strong contrasts that we see between David and Saul. If you remember a few weeks ago when Audrey was preaching on the choosing of Saul, and when Saul was put into the position of king, one of the first things it said about him was that he had surrounded himself, he was surrounded by good men who feared God. And that was one of the first descriptions. And some of them rebelled against that, but a majority of them were God-fearing men who followed Saul. As David comes into power, David is surrounded by everyone who's in distress, the debtors, those who are bitter in soul, those who are down and out, those who have nothing. David is surrounded by people who are destitute. His family comes down to him, his brothers in his father's house, and he's going to take care of them here in a second. But everyone else around him are the people who have nothing. And this matters in their lives, because as we see the contrast, what we're going to see in this passage actually both what Saul does with the men who were God-fearing and what David does with those who are down and out. Because it is significant how they lead in the nation of Israel. Continues, and David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, place number 4. And he says to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me. And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. And the prophet of Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold, depart and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went to the forest of Hereth. So Moab would have been a surrounding nation. It would have been another foreign nation. Actually, Moab and the Moabites are a perpetual thorn in the side of Israel. They are people who typically attack Israel. But this is the place, because he's being chased by the king of Israel, David leaves his parents. And the people of Moab, the king of Moab, agree to watch after David's family for him and keep them safe from the king of Israel, Saul, who's coming after them. And he departs, though, and he goes back to Judah, the forest of Hereth. This would have been back inside of Israel's territory. Now Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men who were with him. And Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul says to his servants who stood about him, hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands of commanders and commanders of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? He says, no one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me, or discloses to me that my son stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as at this day. Saul is in his whiny britches phase. Saul is looking around going, everyone is against me. Everyone is trying to tear me down. Don't you feel bad for me? Don't you feel bad for me that this David guy keeps trying to hurt me? Why didn't you tell me? Why are you against me? Why is everybody else a problem? And he's crying to his men, crying to his people, and he's blaming them for the reason that he's in the situation that he's in. And one of them steps up. One of them says, "You know what, Saul? You're right. I'll help you. I'll help you figure this out." And this good and godly guy is Doeg the Edomite. I don't think that's actually how you say his name, but I think it's Doeg. But I liked Doeg the Edomite. So then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Nob, and Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Here's the part of Doeg the Edomite's name that's important. He's an Edomite from the land of Edom. He is an enemy of Israel. The Edomites are not friends of Israel. Saul has incorporated this man, Doeg, into his closest circle. The fact that they call him Doeg or Doeg the Edomite would have for the Israelite people set off all kinds of red flags. Like, wait a minute, what's an Edomite doing here? This is a problem. It is the equivalent of, like, if you watch Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any like classic fantasy cowboy westerns. If you watch cowboy westerns, this is the guy in all black with the black cowboy hat who just strolled into the saloon, and everyone in the room knows that guy is bad news. Doeg the Edomite is the one who is whispering in Saul's ear, saying, "Oh yeah, I saw that David guy. I saw him when I was over there with that Ahimelech guy. He helped him out, actually. He gave him food, and he actually gave him that sword that belongs to you. Almost like he thinks he should be king or something. Maybe you should go do something about that." So then the king sent to summon Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were at Nob. And all of them came to the king. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." And he answered, "Here I am, my lord." He brings the priest to the castle, brings his whole family to the castle, brings all the priests that serve as part of his tribe to the castle. And he says, "Hey, we need to talk." And Saul says to him, "Why have you conspired against me? You and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait, as at this day." He's like, "Why? Why have you done this evil thing to me? Why have you supported David when you're supposed to be supporting me? This is not okay." And Ahimelech's like, "Wait, what do you mean? I don't even know what you're talking about." He says, because Ahimelech says to the king, "And who amongst your servants is so faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law, the captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of this, much or little." He's like, "Saul, I don't know what you're talking about. I am not guilty of conspiring against you. I'm not a traitor. It was David. David is your trusted man." This is all the things, by the way, that Jonathan was saying about David to his father last week. But now this priest is saying, look, he's your trusted man. There is no one in your kingdom more loyal to you, more faithful to you than David. He's your son-in-law. You let him marry your daughter. Like, he's the captain of your bodyguard. He's the captain of the group that's supposed to keep you safe. He's been honored numerous times in your household. This isn't even the first time I've done this. He's come to the priests at my place before, and I've inquired of God for him then. I've gone and prayed for him, and we've spent time together. He's like, "No, I've done this numerous times. Why would you think me doing this again would be a traitorous act to you? I'm on your side because David's on your side." And Saul hears this and has a very rational response and says, "Oh, you know what? You're right. That's not you're right. I'll just back down." right? No, because fear causes us to do things we wouldn't do otherwise. And the king says, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." And the king said to the guard who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David." And they knew that he fled, and they did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. This is significant because the priests are actually still making good decisions. The good men that had surrounded Saul are still making good decisions. And when he commands them to kill Ahimelech and kill his family and kill the priests because of their support of David, they're still willing to stand and say, "No, sorry, that is a bridge we will not cross. We're not going to strike the priests of the Lord." But there's still that guy dressed in black sitting in the corner, right? Because the king says to Doeg, "You turn and strike the priests." And Doeg the Edomite, because he's an Edomite and not an Israelite, turns and strikes down the priests. And he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. That's just the priests. He killed 85 of the priests. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put it to the sword. Both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, sheep, he put it to the sword. This is the baddest cowboy in the baddest cowboy movie. He is villain to his core. Doeg the Edomite fulfills the command of Saul and wipes out an entire city because of Saul's fear and Saul's anger. Saul starts with men who are devoted to God and drags them right down as far as they can go, to the point that even when they say, "We won't go one step further, we will not kill these people," he has now incorporated Doeg the Edomite, who is as evil as they come, to do his evil bidding for him. But one of the sons of Ahimelech came to the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, 'I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. So stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. And with me you shall be in safekeeping.'" What David says here is not that he's actually responsible, but he takes responsibility for it. He says, "As soon as I knew that Doeg the Edomite, that evil black-hatted cowboy, was in the room, I should have done something then. Because I should have known better that he would have gone and told Saul. And that I know Saul well enough now, and I know Doeg the Edomite well enough now to know that as a result, that would have meant your father's household was in trouble. I should have done something then. I didn't. But now, come be a part of my group. Come stay with my people, and my people will keep you safe. We will have your back moving forward, and this will be a safe place for you." And David remained in the strongholds in the wilderness, in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. This is location like 5, 6, I've lost track. And Saul sought him every day, but God did not give him into his hand. And David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, and the Arabah to the south of Jeshimon. And Saul and his men went down to seek him. And David was told, so he went down to the rock and lived in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. This is like full-on run-for-your-life kind of territory. So David hears that Saul's around, David leaves. He's just hopping from place to place to try to stay one step ahead of Saul, because Saul wants him dead. And through all of this, I have to remind you, David is the anointed king of Israel. At no point do I think, anointed king of Israel, I am going to be living in the wilderness, eating whatever I can get my hands on, and pursued to my grave by the current king of Israel. At no point do I say to God, "Yep, this is exactly how I saw it playing out." But this is exactly how God has it playing out. And Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. This is how close Saul has come to catching David. They're literally just going around the same mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul, and as Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid against this land." So David's coming around one side, Saul's coming around the other. David needs to go fast enough that he can escape before Saul's men come around and meet him on the other side of and then they'll be captured, and David will be a dead man. And it says just before Saul gets there to capture him, he gets a report that the Philistines have made an attack against Israel. The Philistines, who actually should have been Saul's priority anyway, are now attacking behind the lines because he's dedicated such a force to going and capturing David. So Saul actually returns from pursuing after David and went against the Philistines. Therefore, that place is called the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi. So David gets away because the Philistines attack behind the lines and Saul has to retreat. So the Samuel, or the author here, is just simply saying, that's why we call this place the Rock of Escape today, is because this is where God provided a way for David to escape the hand of Saul. So when Saul returned from following the Philistines, so he gets that job done, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi." And Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the wild goats' rocks. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way, where there was a cave. And Saul went in to relieve himself. So the king is chasing David. David is hiding in a cave. Saul and his men are actually camping in front of that cave. And Saul gets to the point in the day where he needs to take care of business. So he decides, I'm going to go into the cave where it's cooler, where it's nicer, and I'm going to see a man about a horse. And he goes into the cave by himself. The very cave where David and his men are hiding. And David's men get excited. Remember, these are people who are destitute. These are people who have nothing. And they're now running with David from this man Saul, knowing that David has been anointed king. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave, and the men of David said to him, "Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as shall seem good to you." And David arose and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Like this, the men get so excited because they're like, that's Saul. Saul has no idea we're here. You're David. God said you're going to be king. God has said he's going to deliver your enemy into your hand. God has said, when I deliver your enemy into your hand, you can do whatever seems good to you to that man. When I give you your enemy, you can do what's right. Go, David. Get it. This is your day. This is your victory. Today is the day that you become king. So David gets up. He goes to Saul. He pulls out his sword, and he cuts off the corner of his robe. So this is not a Peter moment. I don't think he just missed. Actually, I know he didn't just miss because we're going to see that here in a second. He deliberately cuts just his robe and doesn't attack Saul. But David's going to explain his reasoning for that here in just a second. But think what this must have been for the men who were following him. The men who had been running with him. The ones whose life are just as much in danger as his if they get caught. They just saw what he did to Nob. And he doesn't take the opportunity to kill Saul. So afterwards, David's heart struck him. He feels guilty because he cut the corner of Saul's robe. He feels guilty because he cut his clothing. And he says to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. What David says is, I am feeling guilty. I am feeling so guilty because I caused harm to the king. I caused harm to the leader by cutting his clothing. Everyone else in the cave wanted me to cut his head. I cut his clothing, but David says, I feel guilty even over that much damage because that's the guy that God put in charge. That's the guy that God gave the authority to. That's the guy that God made king. The only person who should be able to take out that person is God. I shouldn't put my hand to him because He is the one that God put in charge. And he feels guilty that he even did this little bit. And afterwards, David also arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord, the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, David seeks your harm'? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how my Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave, and some told me to kill you, but I spared you." David continues to react to the king as if he is the king, because he's saying God put him there, only God can take him out. So he responds by bowing his face to the earth, to give homage to the king, to treat him as a king because God said he was the king. It didn't matter how bad Saul was. It didn't matter what Saul was doing. It didn't matter how evil. He had just wiped out an entire city. David said that doesn't change the fact that God put him there. I'm not going to take him out. He says, "I will not put my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand? For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and I did not kill you, you may know and see that there's no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it." He says, "I didn't kill you when I had the opportunity. I want you to know you are still my king. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancient says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you." He says, look, I know you're a wicked guy. I know all the things you've done. I know that you want me dead for no good reason. But the Lord's going to be the one to judge, not me. The Lord's going to be the one who deals with you, not me. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you, and see to it and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. He says, look, you think you're just pursuing something that doesn't matter? Something that's worthless? He's like, no. I am someone the Lord values. So the Lord is going to protect me. And he is going to be the judge between us. The Lord is going to be the one who deals with you. And as soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And David said, "You are more righteous." And he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. And you have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now, behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hands." This is the first time Saul acknowledges that he now knows that David is going to be the next king. He says, "Therefore swear to me, therefore by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." And David swore this to Saul. And then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to his stronghold. Their problems here are not done. Saul is not done being a wicked guy. But at this moment, Saul actually acknowledges that David is going to be the next king, and that the Lord seems to be on his side. So he asks him to make him a promise that when he becomes king, knowing that this promise was actually already made to Jonathan, but David asks him, or Saul asks him, "Would you please just, when I'm gone and you're king, don't do what all the other kings do. Don't do what I would have done had I been given the opportunity. Don't kill all my house to make sure that no one else has a claim to the throne. Just promise me that." And David does. And I point this out specifically because that's going to come up again. This is a very important part of the story that is going to come up again and again as we work through the ending of this book and into 2 Samuel. But for now, I just want to quickly cover our so whats. The things we've seen today. First, good leaders strive to be better and bring up those around them. Saul was given good men to follow him. And over the course of his leadership, he drags them down into the pits with him, to the point that he's even trying to get these good men to kill priests and then choosing for himself Edomites to follow him. David starts with people who have nothing, and yet they follow him, to the point that when they have the opportunity to kill the king, they let him make the decision and they follow him. So good leaders, they strive to be better themselves, David, and bring up those around them that God has given them. Good leaders sometimes, though, need to ignore good advice in order to pursue godly decisions. The reality is the advice David was getting from his men was good advice. If you've got a guy chasing you, trying to kill you, it is good advice to kill them first. That is common military strategy. That's good advice. But in this case, it was not godly advice. And David had to hear that advice from his compatriots and say, no, I need to pursue what God wants more than what I want. And he chooses to let Saul go. The reality is we've only ever seen one perfect leader. He led 12 guys, and they crucified him. That's the only perfect leader who's ever lived on this planet. And yet, the book of Romans tells us that every leader is appointed by God. Every person who has authority only derives that authority from God. Which means we trust the one, not who's leading, but the one who positioned the leader. Scripture tells us that God directs the heart of a king, like a person can just put their hand in a stream of water and redirect the water. So we don't ever need to trust our king. We don't ever need to trust our president. We don't need to trust our leader. We need to trust the God who gave them the authority to lead in the first place. That if he wants someone different, he can do that at any point that he wants. We trust the one who positioned the leader, not the leader himself. Because ultimately, fear is a lack of trust. Fear is saying, I think this thing can hurt me more than God. I think this thing has a bigger impact in my life than my God. And that fear that derives from that leads us to do foolish things. David acts an idiot. Saul wipes out entire populations of cities. But what about me? Fear will often derail me from something that I have seen that God wants me to do, but fear directs me to do something different. Fear can produce things like anger and extreme reactions. Fear, whatever it is that you are afraid of, can cause you to do things that are downright foolish and outside of your nature. And the only way to overcome fear is through trust. Trust that in spite of whatever it is that I'm afraid of, God and God's plan is stronger. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you are a trustworthy God, that you have showed us time and time again that we can rely on you and that you will not forsake us. You are a great God, and we worship you as a result. In your Son's name, amen.